So the BMW M2, M3, M4, M5 and so on, those are such fantastic, sporty, dynamic cars, and they're exclusive as well, but every single one of them are just based on a regular BMW model. Not this new one, however. This is the all-new BMW XM. It's the very first dedicated M car since the original M1. So this only exists as a full-blown M car. There is no base model for this car. As you can see, it's big, bold, brash, and it's got its own unique looks that I would say is, characterful. In Malaysia, this is going to be priced at a cool 1.4 million ringgit. So let's find out what makes this car so special, what it's all about, and most importantly, how it's like to drive. Let's go. First things first, I am driving on the wrong side of the road because we are here in Phoenix, Arizona for the international press drive of the XM as well as the M2. Now this to me is the more important car of the two, so we're starting with this. Now I know M is all about sports cars and everything, but they're taking a big leap forward towards making the brand a bit more inclusive, covering a bit more of a different target market, target profile as well. This is an aspirational car that has its sights set on being sporty and luxury at the same time. Now let's talk about the price first. This has already been available for booking in Malaysia for 1.4 million ringgit. Now before you say that's way too expensive for a BMW M car, think again, because I spoke with the lead engineers yesterday and I asked them what are the rivals of this car that they were targeting. It ranges from the AMG G63, the Audi RS Q8, the Aston Martin DBXs, the Bentley Bentegas, Range Rovers, and all that. And among all those cars, this is the most affordable one yet. Now, of course, affordable is relative, but think about it. The G63 is about 1.8 million, and so is the Audi RS Q8. The Range Rovers, the DBXs, the Purosangue, if you want to consider that as well, those all start about 1.5, maybe 2 million before taxes. So with this car, 1.4 million, you can drive it all year long, no issues at all. While with those, tax-free, duty-free cars, you can only drive it for 3 months at a time and then keep it, in Langkawi. That, by the way, is a tax loophole that I'm very surprised has not been completely closed off yet. Anyway, so 1.4 million, but to me, it's one hell of a bargain for a car this big and this powerful. Let's start with what this car is all about to begin with. This is BMW M's very first dedicated car, like I said, since the original M1. The rest of the BMW M range, the M2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, whatever else, are all based on the standard BMW cars. The M2 is based on the 2 Series, the M3 is based on the 3, so on and so forth. So while each one of them are super special, super dynamic, accelerating to drive and all that, they still share a lot of the same parts. In essence, they are the same base cars as the regular BMW cars. This one is a whole different story. This was designed from the ground up to be a dedicated M car. There is no base version, non-M version of this car. Now, in fact, this has 650 horsepower, and it's not even the most powerful version. There is going to be an XM label red. Remember, it's label red, not real level. That's a whole different thing. So that is going to have 750 horsepower and 1,000 Newton meters of torque, whereas this only has 800 Newton meters. So BMW M has got insane plans for a car like this. So in terms of dimensions, they've basically supersized this car. This has the exact same wheelbase as BMW's biggest SUV, the X7 flagship, but on the outside they've made it slightly shorter, slightly lower to have a bit more of a sporty profile. So yeah, on the outside the size is somewhat in between the X5 and the X7. This is a big and heavy car, of course. How heavy? 2.6 tons. That is a hell lot of weight to carry around, but this does have a big engine and a big electric motor to support all that. Just to give you a bit of a reference point, that is about 300-400 kilograms heavier than a BMW X5, X6, 7 and all that, and it's even heavier than the V12 powered Rolls-Royce Cullinan. Yeah, this is a big and heavy boy, but oh dear God, just listen to it go. As far as flagship models go, man, this is pretty damn special. And of course, we shouldn't go ahead without talking about the looks. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Looking at the photos, videos, is not a looker, is it? But hand on heart, this car in real life, in the flesh, looks a lot better, a heck of a lot better than it does in 2D. All the weird shapes, profiles really do stand out. Now, having spoken to the designers yesterday, the lead engineers, they were saying they didn't set out to design a beautiful car. That's not what they're all about. They wanted a car that would fit an extroverted lifestyle. You know, if you have it, flaunt it kind of car. And if that was their target, they've absolutely nailed it with this car. You know, look at it on the outside, all the big brash details, the gold trim. Yeah, doesn't get any more over the top than this. But in the overall sense, in a good way, because if you want attention, you want to be seen, you want to be noticed, this is the car to be in. Well, anyway, let's talk about the details. The G09 XM, that's right, G09, that's how you know it's somewhat related to the X5, that's the G05, the X7, that's the G07, and this is the G09. It's basically the next level up over those two large SUVs. Anyway, at the front, you're never going to not notice the big nostrils. They're the biggest ones ever fitted on a BMW, and man, yeah, I'm not gonna say it looks pretty, because it's not, definitely not, but yeah, it doesn't look as bad as I initially thought it looked, you know, from photos and the initial videos and so on. In real life, it's striking for sure, it's bold, but it doesn't look bad. Seriously, I'm being honest right here, it does not look bad. Pretty, it's not. Beautiful, it's definitely not, but yeah, it's not a bad looker. And just in case you think that the grille is not big enough, they've lined it in gold. And if that's still not enough, they even have an illuminated frame around the whole grille. So if you see this car driving behind you or driving in front of you, you are going to notice it for sure. For a fact, you'll know that's an XM. Now, the lights also follow the latest luxury lineup of the BMW range. So the X7, the 7 Series, the i7 and all that. This has a similar split headlamp setup. With that, you've got the sort of like eyebrows for DRLs at the top, completely separated from the main beams, main headlights, which is lined slightly below, and it's encased in a somewhat fully black lens as well. Now in this car, the lower lens is designed to sort of disappear into the bumper, which has a lot of black lines on it as well. Moving further down, you just know that this is a big serious car, because pretty much all the intakes are real, all the vents are real, either channeling air to cool radiators, part of the engine and so on, or they've got aerodynamic purposes to shape the air around the car in a positive manner. And then you see it from the side, this has really slab-sided profile, huge wheels on the side on this car, and the one we're going to get in Malaysia as well, big as 23 20-inch wheels. You know, on normal cars, even the big ones, you've got wheel options that go perhaps up to 20, 21, so whatever. With this car, it starts at 21 and we are getting the absolute biggest 23-inch alloys. The tires at the back are proper Lamborghini wide stuff. It's 315 profile. Yeah, we are talking about a very serious car right now. Another thing that will surely catch your attention is that character line around the side and goes all the way up into the window line. Now this BMW claims is a bit of a callback, an homage to the original M1. Now the M1 had this rubber line going around the entire car, which was typical of, you know, a car from the 60s, 70s and so on. This is, yeah, a callback to that time. I don't think it looks that great, and you know, up close you can see where the lines are being cut by the door lines and whatnot. Sometimes it doesn't really line up. I think the tolerances are not quite up to the usual high German standards. I think this car is built in the US after all. Don't tell people here I say that though. This unique character line also integrates the usual BMW Hofmeister kink, but not in the traditional sense. Now this is the so-called latest interpretation of the Hofmeister kink. It doesn't really work for me. I don't think it looks enough like a BMW, especially in that area. But if, again, the point was to catch your attention, yeah, that extra line, especially in gold, certainly does the job. And if you wait for the label red, that's gonna be lined in red. The grille's gonna be in red as well, so you know you are talking about the absolute highest performance BMW you can ever buy. Now moving to the back, there are even more callbacks to the original M1. Now the fact that this is the very first dedicated M car after the original M1, they do want to have a lot of references to that original car. So if you look at the very top end of the rear, this car doesn't really have a traditional spoiler in that sense, but the shape, the top line of the rear windscreen, it sort of mimics the shape of the rear deck of the M1. You've also got the iconic double BMW roundels on the top corners of the car, again from the M1, although on this XM over here, instead of an actual physical BMW emblems, you have the logo sort of etched into the windscreen. I think it looks pretty cool, especially if you get the reference from the classic as well. Moving further down, you've got the tail lights. When they are not lit, they're just completely black, very subtle, but when the lights do come on, it's got this very nice signature line. I think it looks fantastic. On the side of the tail lights, you've got these three lines. It's supposed to reference two things. Number one, it's made to look like the, you know, the usual slashes on an M logo, and at the same time, it's another throwback to the louvers around the old M1. Now as far as retro callbacks go, this one, yeah, I think it's pretty good. We're not even done yet, of course. At the bottom of the car, you've got two vertically stacked exhaust pipes. You've got four as usual for a BMW M car, but instead of using a pair of double pipes down the bottom as is normal, they've actually stacked them up vertically, the first time for a proper BMW car. But if you look back at the previous M performance versions of the M3, M4 and of course the latest M2 as well, you sort of get that BMW has been trying to subtly channel your mind to accept this one over here. All the pipes are of course real. The Kawau stick of truth, this car will not fail that test. Absolutely not. And if you look closely, the upper pipes actually channel air further up, not even down. I think that looks pretty cool. And that brings us to the exhaust note itself, because this is a big old V8 car and it sounds absolutely fantastic. It sounds really loud, really gruff, especially on a cold start. And once you start driving it, listen to that, guys. That's a proper V8 right there. And it sort of fits the location that we are at right now, it actually sounds like an old school American style V8 with a low offbeat rumble. It's not quite the slightly high pitch noise that we are used to in BMW M cars. I mean the other M5, M6s and so on. This one, they've made it lower, made it a bit more bassy, and it really does fit the car, I think. But before we get to the way it drives, let's talk about the interior first, because it's every bit as extroverted as the exterior. The first thing that you will notice that this actually shares a lot of similar parts to the facelifted X5 and X6. The big screen, the steering wheel, this aircon setup, it's very similar to the latest X5 and X6. But beyond that, BMW M has done quite a good job in elevating this beyond all those two so-called regular cars. The top of the dashboard on the passenger side, the right side on this car, is covered in this absolutely stunning coffee brown vintage leather. You've got the same material across the top of the door cards, the rear as well. Man, this is perhaps my favorite interior material I've seen yet. It doesn't have that, you know, very consistent industrialized look of a normal leather. It's got small little defects here and there. The colors are a bit uneven here and there. This really looks like one of those old money sofas that you see in the movies and whatnot in big old cigar lounges. It's the exact same one that you see in a car like this. And then we got the seats as well, full on merino leather, super soft, super smooth. And if you can get it in this stunning green shade to match the exterior color, especially the hero, you know, Cape York green, man, it doesn't get any more striking than this. Green on the outside, gold trim, brown and green on the inside. Chef's kiss right there. So good. Of course, being a proper M car, you've got loads of carbon fiber everywhere. Although in this case, they've done it pretty subtly. It's not too over the top. On the steering wheel, you've got black chrome instead of even more carbon. I think that's a nice touch. And yeah, material work over here is generally very, very good. It's not that big of a step up compared to an X6 or an X5, but it does feel more premium, it does feel more plush, it definitely feels more expensive, which obviously it is. At the back, I think, is where this car is super unique. Now, instead of BMW's regular, you know, very boring, very hard seats, you've got what looks like a sofa back there. It looks closer to what you'd find in a Rolls-Royce than an X7 or a 7 Series. BMW M calls it the M Lounge. And I like to think they found inspiration from cigar lounges. And in fact, you know, the internal code, development code for this car was Rockstar. And if you look at the rear, absolutely nails it. Now, to sit on, this is without a doubt one of the best rear seats I've ever been in. The seats wrap around the side as well, meaning you can lean on the side and talk to your friend, the other passenger. It really feels like nothing else you've seen out there. The seats themselves, super soft, way softer than most other German car seats. And the backrest, the shape of the backrest is just so perfect. You wouldn't even think of adjusting the angle at all, because of course you cannot. These are fixed rear seats, you cannot adjust it back and forth. And I actually put this question forth on the engineer as well, like, why didn't you have any sort of seat adjustment for this car? And they were like, you know why? You normally adjust your rear seats to get more comfortable, and that means it wasn't that comfortable to begin with. With this car, it's perfect from the start, so you wouldn't even think of adjusting anything. And I absolutely agree. The back seats easily, without a doubt, better than the ones in the X7 and even the 7 Series. It's that good. Another thing that this car does not have is any form of a sunroof, panoramic roof, any sort of glass at the top. Instead, what you do get is this really cool prism shaped ceiling, and you even have a really bright ambient lighting that goes around it as well. Now, BMW made a conscious decision to only offer the XM in this configuration. You can't get a glass roof, you cannot get a carbon roof even. So, but I think it's a pretty good decision. This looks fantastic, it looks unique, and it really sets you in the mood in the back there. And yes, I did say that you can't even have a carbon roof on top of this car, which by now has become a bit of a trademark BMW M thing. But you know, I don't think they were all that concerned with saving weight with this car. 2.6 ton, removing 10 kilograms on the roof, that's like blowing a feather off an elephant. That's not gonna make any difference at all, I think. We're almost done with the rear seats, but I'm just here to say it's not quite perfect yet, because as plush, as expensive, as premium as everything feels, there are a few flaws here and there. Certain interior trim, especially if you're sitting in the back, right next to your head, you can see a bit of a shiny, cheap plastic trim. Now, this usually wouldn't really stand out. It only stands out in this particular car because everything else just feels so supremely expensive, to the point that one small cheap plastic really stands out. You also won't find any form of screens in the back there, but I asked the engineers and they said, you know what, just jump into the back of any car that's say 10 years old, 20 years old, and if it has any of the rear screens, you wouldn't use them at all. And they're right, like a 7 Series with a big screen in the back from 10 years ago, absolutely state of the art back then, looked fantastic, looked great. But you look at it now with fresh eyes, with 2023 knowledge, it looks like trash. You would not touch those screens at all. What they've done is add a small little accessory point where you can put your iPad, your Surfaces, whatever, something that you are used to, and this can be easily upgradable as you buy newer tablets. That makes the car feel contemporary, even though it's gonna be 5-10 years down the road. But the thing is, the small flap that opens up that attachment point is the same one that's in the BMW iX, and it's still the cheapest feeling latch I've seen on any car ever. Surely they could have done better, but yeah. Finally, let's talk about the engine. Up front is a brand new motor, an S68 BMW 4.4 litre twin turbo V8. This is newer than the old S63 engine found in the M5, M6s, M8 and so on. This is the first time this engine is being used on a proper M car, and it is a properly M developed engine as well. As you can know by the S in the name, a regular BMW run-of-the-mill car will either start with a B or an N. This is an S, meaning special, I'm guessing. BMW says this doesn't have a single carryover part from the old S63 engine. The entire block is different, the pistons, the crankshafts are all now forged, very different. It's got, for the very first time, double Vanos system that's electrically operated instead of using hydraulics. It still has Valvematic, it has a much higher high pressure injectors as well. Yeah, it's a whole new thing. Engine itself produces 490 horsepower, but on top of that, this is also a plug-in hybrid, so there's also a big electric motor to push the outputs even higher to 650 horsepower and 800 Newton meters of torque. So 0 to 100 is done in just 4.3 seconds on a big heavy car like this. Keep your right foot down for another 10 seconds, you're up to 200 kilometers per hour. Absolutely amazing. Just we are 80 and we're at 100, and yeah, I'm talking about miles, of course, not even kilometers. This car is amazing when it comes to performance. The fact that this is a plug-in hybrid makes it even faster still, even with BMW's super responsive V8 engines with the best of the ZF 8-speed automatics. As you plant your foot down, you still need the engine to spool up. There is going to be a tiny bit of turbo lag. There is going to be a bit of a delay for the transmission to shuffle down a few gears. But with the plug-in hybrid, while all those things are being done, the electric motor is already sending power to the wheels, so it sort of fills in the gaps where the engine and the transmission is sort of priming itself to let loose. The electric motor is already pushing you forward, and then when everything comes together, oh dear God, wow, performance really nothing short of mind-blowing. I cannot imagine how the label red is going to feel like. I don't think you'd ever need a label red over this. Insane. Wow. As for the plug-in hybrid, this has a maximum EV range of up to 88 kilometers on pure electric mode. You can even drive up to 140 kilometers per hour in full electric mode, but not that you want to, of course, because in hybrid mode, this car is just fantastic. It sounds great, it goes like bonkers. I don't think you'd want to drive it in EV mode at all. Talking to the BMW M engineers, you really get the feeling that they tried super hard to keep the usual BMW M engagement, the entertainment factor with this car, and a big part of that is that big ICE engine, the big combustion engine. With a pure EV, it's going to be hard to get that mental stimulation as you drive along. It's going to be super quick, obviously, but that level of connection to the driver, the level of engagement is going to be a lot less. So moving forward, they're going to do a lot more of this electrification stunt. You're going to see a lot more mild hybrid, a lot more plug-in hybrids like this, and as a first one, this is just stunning. They just blown it out the door, really. Let's talk about the handling. Now, the first thing to know is that this car does not ride on air suspension. It rides on traditional adaptive dampers and steel springs. Of course, you can choose between a few comfort, sport plus modes to, sort of fit the road you're in, to fit the mood you're in. But the fact that this isn't an air suspension means the range of motions, the range of adjustments is not quite as wide as what we're used to in more advanced air suspension system. So even though BMW M says this is the most comfortable BMW M car ever, yeah, it's still not the best in terms of ride quality. It's still a little bit rough around the edges. You feel a lot of the sharp jolts just sending a shiver down the spine of the car. Yeah, it's not quite a luxury barge, I would say. Everything is still relative, of course. This is far better riding than, say, a G63 AMG that is just far too jiggly for everyday drive. But it's nowhere near as comfortable as, say, a Range Rover SVR or, let alone the high-spec Range Rover SV. In terms of comfort, I would assume that had they fitted this car with an air suspension system, it will be far more comfortable. But speaking to the engineers, they said yes, they admit it could be more comfortable still with air suspension, but their number one focus was agility. This is a high performance car first and foremost, a luxury car second, so that is precisely why they went with the adaptive suspension instead of air. Now, driving around in switchback roads like this, pretty rare in America obviously, I do get the feeling that it's a bit of a compromise. In comfort mode, it's not quite comfortable, and in sport or sport plus mode, the body control is insane. The level of traction, the amount of speed you can carry through corners is just mind-blowing. You will not find a more athletic, a more dynamic car ever. Perhaps the Purosangue, but that's a whole different league altogether, isn't it? But as an overall SUV that you will be driving every single day, day in and day out, I think they've sort of erred on the side of dynamism instead of comfort, which, I think would fit its target customer profiles a little bit more, I think. I could be wrong, but what do you think? Do comment below, let me know what you think. This also runs BMW's very latest 48-volt anti-roll system. Now, this is a big step up, a big development compared to the previous dynamic drive systems that BMW has had since like the mid-2000s. Like, say, the old 7 Series, the old E60 5 Series had a hydraulically controlled dynamic drive system that limits the body control, that limits the body roll as the car goes through corners. Now this one is far more powerful. It's now electrically operated instead of being hydraulic, and that is only available because they've switched to a far better 48 volt electrical architecture now. So the engineers were saying that the forces they can put on each wheel is far higher to control, or rather limit the roll of this car on each individual corner. So this is precisely why, as you chuck this car in through corners, which you really shouldn't do considering how heavy this car is, it really feels flat. This feels like you're driving a super powerful sedan. It doesn't feel like you are driving a big and heavy SUV. It feels closer to a BMW M5 than an X5M. That is for certain. Now this active body control system also benefits comfort as well. Now the thing is, with big and tall SUVs, as even the most cushy soft ones, as you go through a bit of bumps, a bit of undulations, you get that, you know, that rocking feel, that pitch, that body movement. With this car, it really does limit the body roll, so you don't get seasick, or so you don't get car sick as quickly. So in terms of tech, it's an absolute marvel of a car. This is the absolute best that BMW M can do right now, and whew, what a car. A lot of people will not like the way it looks, but if you don't, that's fine. Don't buy it. That's your loss, really. If you can't afford it, you want to be seen, you want to be the center of attention everywhere you go, this is the car to get. For me, I still don't think it looks good, but I think it looks right for the target market. Much more so than Lamborghini Urus, Aston Martin DBX, perhaps not quite the G63, but I could just be biased. But you know what? To drive, this runs rings around the G-Class. There's no denying that. Plus, the interior is just so good. And the back seats, you will not find better seats on any car out there, let alone sporty SUV. So I think the breadth, the profile, the appeal of this car is just so wide. It's no surprise that BMW M fully expects this to be one of their best-selling models moving forward. So there you go, the BMW XM, 1.4 million ringgit when it drops in Malaysia. What do you think of this car? Do you think it's worth that much money? Do you think it looks good? I don't think you will. Do you think it looks, you know, striking enough to command that level of pricing? Me, I think it absolutely does. To me, in essence, this really does fit the internal code of rockstar. You really feel like a rockstar driving this car. You certainly feel like one sitting in the back with all the level of luxury and decadence in the back there. The level of tech is just mind-blowing, absolute best that BMW M can do right now. It does feel like a bit of an experimental kind of car. The things that it tries to do, the level of interior detail, the vintage leather especially. But I think it all works, and at 1.4 million, it's a bit of a bargain too. As controversial as that sounds, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of this car as a whole, what you think of my review. Do comment below. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.